The first thing I did after becoming president of the company was tear open the clothes of every female secretary one by one, simply because I needed to check whether they had special tattoos on their backs. Then I invited the most skilled female tattoo artist in the world and told them that tonight they must cover my entire body with forbidden tattoos, an evil god on my left arm, an angel on my right arm. Even my private areas had to be tattooed all around. It turned out that soon, a global blood moon would descend, and all living beings would mutate. Ants that were normally insignificant could instantly transform into 100-meter giants. Even a single weed could grow into a towering tree, and countless humans would become their food. But those with tattoos would be shocked to discover that the tattoos on their bodies awakened as well. Some had tattooed the 10 kings of hell and became rulers of 10,000 ghosts. Others had tattooed the mythical Qilin and transformed into divine beasts guarding entire regions. But in my previous life, because I had no tattoos, I became livestock at the very bottom, now reborn 2 months before the apocalypse. I immediately spent a fortune hiring hundreds of top tattoo artists worldwide. At this moment, I walked to the window and looked at the blue sky, and couldn't help sighing that this was the last time I could enjoy it. When the early morning of June 7th arrives, the entire world will be covered in a thick smog. There are still 2 months before the world mutates. There should still be enough time to build a large shelter. Once the mutation arrives, all creatures will become unimaginably powerful, leaving almost no place for humans to survive. In the early stage of the apocalypse, building a shelter is the best choice. Then I picked up my phone and made a call, asking them to find out where an abandoned large-scale prison was for sale. The corporation my parents left me spans several industries, and real estate is one of them. Tom told me that in the western suburbs, in the Gobi area, there was a site of over 500,000 square meters, much larger than the capital's central square, and it was currently selling for 700 million. I immediately cut him off. That desolate western area was absolutely perfect. He was completely confused by my actions, but I didn't bother explaining, and told Tom to contact the person in charge of the prison immediately to acquire it as fast as possible and begin construction. The walls must be at least several hundred meters tall and at least 2 meters thick, built with reinforced concrete. The ground must be the same, and both the lower and upper layers must be covered with steel plates. My goal is to build a massive shelter with enough supplies for thousands of people to survive for 3 years. He was completely stunned after hearing this. He said that if I wanted to build it like that, it would require an additional 30 to 40 billion. I decisively gave him 10 billion and ordered him to finish within 50 days. It must be built like an apocalypse fortress. After saying that, I hung up. The shelter arrangements were complete. Now all I have to do is wait for the world-class tattoo masters to arrive. Then I sat down on the luxurious sofa, searching online for which tattoos were the strongest. In the end, I chose 6 or 7 of the most powerful demonic tattoos. Once these tattoos were carved onto my body, when the world mutated and tattoos awakened, I couldn't even imagine how powerful I would become. I remember in my previous life, those who had tattoos like the Azure Dragon or Qilin stood at the very peak of this planet. But among the mutated beasts, there were also those capable of opposing them. On Mount Kunlun, there was a golden dragon. On Mount Ame, there was a monkey king, both overwhelmingly powerful, and all the monkeys in the world were under his rule. After the world mutated, wild animals became the true rulers of this world. Countless colossal beast kings began to rampage. In the early stage, humans relied on powerful thermal weapons to intimidate them. Later, they depended on awakened tattoo bearers for protection. By evening, a black luxury business car slowly pulled up. A tall, sexy woman in a professional suit stepped out from the passenger seat, her figure slender and alluring, and a middle-aged man stepped out from the back seat. By then, my AI assistant had already notified me, so I knew Lisa and the others had arrived. A moment later, I walked into the living room wearing black pajamas. Lisa introduced the world-renowned tattoo master. I reached out and shook his hand, then sat down on the sofa opposite them. John directly asked what kind of tattoos I wanted. I lifted my gaze and smiled faintly. I need 6 or 7 tattoos, including the King of Hell, an evil god, Black Dragon Death, Divine Azura, Nether God, and so on. Hearing that I wanted so many tattoos, even the well-experienced John was shocked. Regarding the tattoos I mentioned, he clearly had done his research. I took a sip of tea and told him he only needed to focus and tattoo me in his best condition. Whether I could withstand them was my own problem. Then the process began. As the evening sun set, John walked out of the room. Lisa stepped forward to ask. John nodded at her, indicating that the tattoos were done perfectly and that it was the most focused work of his entire career. Then I told John to tattoo a female Rakshasa on Lisa as well. Lisa froze when she heard that, but hearing the stern tone in my voice, she could only nod helplessly. A moment later, I walked out shirtless, my body now covered in tattoos. When tattoos awaken, the stronger the tattoos carved on the body, the more intense the pain one must endure. With these tattoos on me, there was a chance I might explode and die. In my previous life, I wasn't an awakened tattoo bearer. I only knew the awakening process was painful, but now I was ready to risk everything. Around 9 o'clock, I sent John and the others away. Lisa stood in the room looking at me, completely confused by my actions. I told her that soon she would be grateful to me. Then I turned and left. Tattooing her was entirely because she had followed me for 6 or 7 years and counted as someone reliable. I told her to inform finance when she returned, to grant Tom access to 10 billion in funds. Hearing this, Lisa wanted to ask something, but I never liked explaining, and walked away quickly. Time quickly moved to May 1st. On this day, after more than 20 days of massive construction at the prison site, many online media outlets were reporting the news, and many streamers were even broadcasting it live. Thousands of workers were working day and night in shifts, and in just 28 days, more than 2/3 had already been completed. At this pace, barring any accidents, it should be finished in another 10+ days. Ordinary people just assumed rich folks had nowhere else to spend their money. No one thought about an impending catastrophe, but I didn't care about the outside world at all. During this past month, I had been working out constantly. In my previous life, I had heard that if one's body was too weak during tattoo awakening, they might not survive the process. I had to use these 2 months to get myself into the best possible condition. Just then, a text message came to my phone. I picked it up and checked, and saw that a large sum had been deposited deposited, amounting to more than 67 billion. At the same time, Lisa called. She asked if I had received the money. I responded lightly, and said with satisfaction that she handled things well. But Lisa hesitated, wanting to say something, but eventually said it anyway. In her eyes, I had become extremely depraved. She didn't want to stay by the side of a man who would sell off his parents' legacy and spend tens of billions building a useless place. But I simply replied calmly that last month's salary would be transferred to her card soon. Lisa leaving didn't affect my mood in the slightest. Everyone has their own path. Leaving now, and wanting to return later, would be nothing but wishful thinking. At that moment, a burly man in a black suit walked into the villa. I lifted my teacup, and looked up to ask how things were going. Jerry let out a low chuckle, saying that all 100 of his brothers had gotten demon tattoos, and that all of them were orphans, with no attachments, and absolutely loyal to me, their boss. At this point, he lowered his voice and asked whether the apocalypse was coming. I didn't hide anything from him, because he was a brother who had risked his life for me, and had once taken a knife for me. Then I told him to supervise the construction in the western suburbs carefully, and preferably finish within 10 days, and then spend a few more days transporting supplies. Jerry nodded heavily. Time quickly moved to May 28th. That day, after nearly 10 billion had been invested in the western Gobi, the massive shelter covering more than 500,000 square meters, stood there like a small city, creating an overwhelming visual impact. The massive walls stood over 670 meters tall, and more than 20 meters thick. Wind turbines stood at intervals along the perimeter. High above, an electric grid stretched across the sky. To prevent attacks from vicious birds, countless solar panels were fixed along the walls. Not only were the walls made of reinforced concrete, but the ground inside the shelter was as well. Even the lower and upper layers were covered with thick steel plates. After the world mutated, aside from tattoo bearers, all creatures evolved, and rats and ants became extremely dangerous. Looking inside the walls, rows of buildings stood tall, able to support tens of thousands of people. Everyone wondered why I built such a colossal structure. Could the apocalypse really be coming? Many streamers gathered outside the shelter, along with crowds who traveled from afar just to watch. Staring at this gigantic structure, everyone was utterly shocked.